Thank you for viewing our Key Stage 2 SATs video. We do hope you find it really useful for forthcoming SATs that your child will be taking in May. In May, all children nationally will be taking standard assessment tasks, or SATs as they're commonly referred to. This short video is to provide you with information about this assessment and also to advise you how best you can support your child. The children in Year 6 will take SATs in reading, spelling, punctuation and grammar, and maths. The SATs run from Monday the 9th of May to Thursday the 12th of May. On the screen, you can see the assessment your child will be taking each day. There's no writing SAT, as this is assessed by your child's teacher, and then standards will be moderated. We thought it would be helpful to provide the context for the standard assessment tests or SATs at the end of Year 6. As can be seen on the screen, Year 6 marks the end of Key Stage 2, and it's the time when most children move from their primary or junior school to their secondary school. At St Osmond's, we feel extremely fortunate there is no barrier from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3, and the children move seamlessly to their new Key Stage, and their learning and curriculum will build on their previous knowledge and understanding. SATs do provide yourself, as parents, as a comparator to see how your child is doing compared nationally against other children. We would just like now to explain what your child will experience during their assessments in May. The majority of the children will be taking their tests in the Barnes building under exam conditions. On the screen, you'll see the timings of the test, and you can see no test lasts for more than an hour. They will be externally marked, and we normally receive the results in May, and then we'll communicate the results to you. Children with additional needs will be given support on a day-to-day basis. For example, children with a visual impairment will be given a modified paper that they will sit. Similarly, children with an education and health care plan will be allowed an additional 25% of time. After your child's paper is marked, the raw scores are then converted to a standardised score to enable tests to be meaningfully compared. The scale scores range from 80 to 120. A scale score of 100 and more has been set as a meeting the national standard. Similarly, to be judged to have reached the higher standard, a scale score of 110 or more is required.
The children will sit 3 maths papers. Paper 1 is the arithmetic paper, which will take place on the Wednesday of SATs week. It has a standard timing of 30 minutes and is worth a total of 40 marks. It covers the 4 operations, as well as number properties, calculating percentages of amounts, calculations using decimals and calculations using fractions. Here are some examples of the sorts of questions children might be expected to answer in Paper 1. Papers 2 and 3 are reasoning papers, and they'll take place on the Wednesday and the Thursday. Both have standard timings of 40 minutes and are worth 35 marks each, giving us a total of 110 marks over the 3 papers. Papers 2 and 3 require children to demonstrate their mathematical knowledge of skills as well as their ability to solve problems and their mathematical reasoning. There are a variety of questions at different levels of difficulty, so we do encourage the children to go through and choose their favourites to answer first, rather than using all their time worrying about questions they can't do simply because it's the next question, because they can always go back through the paper and have a go at questions that they've got left if they've got time. Here are some examples of sorts of questions that children might find in the reasoning papers. You can help your child with their maths at home. As well as supporting them to complete their home learning, which is their written work and their TT Rockstars, you could support them to develop their fluency of known facts, such as numbers that add together to make a target number, or quick addition and subtraction of single-digit numbers. You could play maths games with them or encourage them to tell the time on clocks at home. On the screen are a few other suggestions you might use at home. If you'd like, maths revision guides will be available for you to order via Pay60, and you'll get more information about this separately.
Sats week will begin on Monday the 9th of May with the grammar, punctuation and spelling papers. There are two of these. The first one is the longer one, 45 minutes. In this paper, pupils are tested on their grammar, punctuation and spelling generally. They then move on to paper 2, which doesn't have a finite amount of time put on it, but normally takes around 15 to 20 minutes. And here their pupils are just tested on spellings. Sentences are read out with a gap in them, and the missing spelling has to be written in by the child. A little bit more detail on paper 1 of the grammar then. So we in class are practicing these skills all the time, particularly this half term. We're focusing specifically on one grammar lesson a week with one skill a week. Also, you reinforce these through the 10-minute workouts that are done for homework, which is why it's really important that the pupils engage with those. You'll see here the sorts of things that are covered within the test. So it talks about things like terminology, so talking about nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, things like that. Different types of sentences, like exclamation sentences, question sentences. Looking for things like certain types of phrases, so for example expanded noun phrases or different types of clauses like relative clauses, the different tenses and verb forms, so things like past and present, but also things like past progressive or continuous tense, all the forms of punctuation that are taught up to year 6, that's a full range from things like capital letters and full stops all the way up to sort of semicolons and brackets and colons, things like that. Vocabulary, terminology, linking also into sort of standard English, so thinking about where something's more formal than another phrase or word. And all of those together are tested in the paper in different ways. So you might be circling missed letters, you might be doing a multiple choice question, you might need to write down a one-word answer, you might be joining lines to one another. What you're not doing is ever really writing a lengthy answer on this paper. Here you'll find some example questions, and on the next slide you'll find the answers so that you can see what that should look like. Here you find a couple of examples of the sorts of sentences that would come up in spelling paper 2. So these are the sentences that a teacher might read aloud. They would tell the children the word that is missing in the gap, and then the child would write it down. The children get 2 chances to hear the sentence, so if they miss it the first time, they can always fill it in on the second time. On this slide, you'll see some ways that you can support with spelling, punctuation and grammar. Obviously, in terms of homework, we set the 10-minute test books, which reinforce lots of the key skills. We also set, in terms of spelling, the spelling shed games. Spelling is split into words which follow patterns and words which don't, of which there are some key word lists. These are detailed as list words for year 3, 4, 5 and 6. These words are the words that are currently tested on Spellshed and practiced on Spellshed. So it's really worth the children spending some time each week practicing those particular spellings. If you wish to purchase some supportive book bundles that relate to the grammar, punctuation and spelling, details on these will be coming out shortly. The second test that pupils will take for English is the reading SAT paper. This paper is an hour long and will consist of 3 different texts, which we don't ever know in advance, but it will be a combination of a non-fiction, a fiction and or a poem. And in this paper, lots of different types of comprehension questions come up. So you can see here the sorts of questions that are detailed. So it might be about the meaning of the word in the context. It might be about retrieving information. It could be about summarizing the idea. It could be about inferring, so looking beneath the surface of the text. Why is a character behaving in that way, do you think, based on what you've read? It could be predicting, again, not sort of a random guess, but predicting based on what you've read so far. It could be about explaining. These are questions that children often find quite challenging, where they have to give more detail in an answer. So those are ones that we practice a lot in school. It could be also about making comparisons and thinking about the author's word choice. Within these papers, you again get sort of one-word questions and you get multiple answer questions, but you also get chunkier questions that are normally worth 3 marks, where you need to really make your point, give some evidence from the text and explain your thinking. On the following slide, you'll find some examples of reading questions. You'll see the text, the question, how many marks it's worth, and also which part of the content domain it comes from. So is it a retrieval question or an explanation question? You'll also find the answers, so you can see the sorts of things that we're looking for the children to record down. So since this style of test came in, certain areas of those content domains have tended to have more questions based on them. So if you look here, 20% of the marks gained are often linked to explanation, which again is why I say we focus on that so much in school. Over a quarter of them are about retrieval. That's a good thing because those skills are normally the most basic skills, going in, finding a piece of information and literally copying it out. And then almost half of the marks are inference. Generally, children find this quite challenging skill. So we practice this a lot in school, and I explained what inference means on the earlier slide. Below, at the bottom of this slide, there are some ways that you can support your child at home when thinking about these particular content domains. And you also have the reading bookmark that has ideas and sentence stems on for you to support your child with their comprehension. How can you help with reading? Most importantly, really focusing on building an enjoyment and a love of reading with your child. We sent out at the beginning of the year a leaflet about supporting reading at home. It was added to one of our newsletters in September. If you'd like another copy of that, you can always email your child's English teacher. Also, making sure that a little and often reading is happening rather than massive long chunks, but less frequently. That's really helpful. And discussing what your child is reading with them. Any form of reading is valuable, but also particularly if your child is on a colour-banded book from school, making sure that that is a book that they are frequently reading is excellent practice. As with maths and grammar, there are also reading bundles available to support with SATs preparation, and information will come out to you about those shortly. Other than the spelling, punctuation and grammar test, there is no test for writing. Writing is assessed by the teacher on an ongoing basis using a document called the Teacher Assessment Framework. This document states that writing judgment should be a complete fit, which means that pupils need to show evidence of all of the strands in their writing in order to achieve the expected standard. This standard, a long time ago, was called best fit, where you didn't have to show all of them. If you showed the majority of strands, then you could say, yes, I've achieved the standard. But we currently have to use a complete fit model, which means every strand has to be shown by the pupil. A few more details on writing that you might need to be aware of or you might want to discuss with your child. Spelling. Those spelling words that we've taught that involve spelling patterns and also the year 3, 4, 5 and 6 word lists have to be spelt mostly correctly in children's writing for them to achieve the expected standard. Similarly, with punctuation, the range of punctuation taught needs to be used mostly correctly. So that's everything from your capital letters and your full stops that were taught in year 1, all the way up to your brackets, your commas for clauses, your semicolons, things like that we are talking about more towards the top of Key Stage 2. We spend a lot of time in school focusing on the different genres that are taught and writing for our purpose and audience. So pupils selecting the vocabulary and the grammar features to suit their task. Something else to keep in mind is handwriting. To achieve the expected standard, handwriting must be joined. So that is why we are placing such a focus on it within school. In very rare cases, you can argue that one part of the framework is a significant weakness and therefore the child can still achieve the standard. But as I said before, this is rare. The writing standard is split into 3 areas: working towards, working at the expected, which is where we expect the majority of our pupils to be, and working at greater depth within the expected standard. On the next 3 slides, you will find the different elements that correlate to those different standards. Finally, on this slide, you will find examples of ways you can support writing at home. If you have any further questions, do please feel free to email your child's English teacher.
We're now coming towards the end of this short video, and we'd like to share with you some advice how we together can support your child with their forthcoming SATs. Firstly, we'd like to emphasise the importance of providing your child with reassurance. SATs are just a snapshot and show attainment at one moment in time. We'll be continually working with your child in the months and years ahead to help them reach their potential. On the screen now, you'll find some advice that we will have to help your child with the forthcoming SATs. You will also see some advice about SATs from a former pupil. We do hope that you found this video helpful. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact your child's subject teacher. The most effective way of doing this is by email, and contact details for all teachers are to be found on our school website. Thank you.